Hello, my name is Monica. I'm 45 years old now, and I live in a small apartment in Frankfurt. It's quiet here, peaceful. It wasn't always this way. For most of my life, my world felt loud and chaotic, filled with the needs and demands of others, especially my family. I used to think that's just what life was, constantly giving, constantly trying to earn love and acceptance by making myself smaller, by solving problems that weren't mine to solve. I spent years walking on eggshells, performing endless acts of service that went unseen, unacknowledged, and certainly unappreciated. I was the dependable one, the responsible one, the one they called when something went wrong or money was tight. And I answered every time. Why? Because I desperately wanted to be loved. I wanted to feel like I belonged, like I was truly part of the family unit, not just the designated fixer. But here's the thing about constantly giving without receiving, about letting boundaries erode until they vanish completely. You teach people how to treat you. And I taught my family that my needs were secondary, that my time was worthless, and that my love was unconditional, even when their actions were anything but loving. I didn't realize I was setting myself up for a fall, a devastating betrayal that would shake me to my very core. It wasn't one big explosion that changed everything, not at first. It was a slow, insidious process, like water dripping on a stone, wearing away at my spirit day after day, year after year. But there was a moment, a specific point in time, when the scale tipped, when I finally saw the truth of my situation with blinding clarity. That truth was painful, devastating, and utterly liberating all at once. It forced me to make a choice that felt impossible at the time, a choice that went against every instinct I had cultivated over 4 decades of people-pleasing. It was the hardest thing I've ever done, and also the best. It led me here, to this quiet apartment, this peaceful life, this new version of myself who is stronger, clearer, and finally, truly free. If you've ever felt overlooked, if you've ever bent yourself into impossible shapes to keep the peace, if you've ever been betrayed by the people who were supposed to love you unconditionally, maybe you'll recognize parts of yourself in my story. Maybe it will resonate. Let me know where you're watching or listening from in the comments below. My story, the one that truly mattered, didn't begin with a boardroom drama or a hostile takeover. It began quietly, in the humid, slightly dusty air of my childhood home, with the unspoken rules and the heavy expectations that settled on my shoulders like a familiar shroud. I was the middle child, sandwiched between an older brother who left home early and carved out his own fiercely independent life, and my younger sister, Lena, who remained tethered to our mother's orbit. A constant focal point of attention, worry, and misplaced hope. From a young age, I learned my role. I was the sensible one, the quiet observer, the one who finished her homework without being told, who helped with the chores, who mediated the small, simmering conflicts that were a constant undercurrent in our home. Lena was the fragile one, the artistic one, the one who needed more help, more encouragement, more everything. My mother, Maria, had a way of making Lena's perceived needs the central organizing principle of our family life. Lena's struggles, real or imagined, became everyone else's responsibility. And mostly, that responsibility fell to me. It started small. While Lena practiced her flute or retreated to her room with a sketch pad, I was in the kitchen helping Mother prepare dinner or doing the dishes afterward. When Lena needed help with a school project she'd left until the last minute, I was the one called upon, my own plans quietly shelved. While Lena flitted from one interest to the next, rarely seeing anything through, Mother would sigh dramatically about Lena's sensitive soul and lack of direction. Discussions I was privy to, which subtly reinforced the idea that Lena was a project, a problem to be managed and supported, primarily by me. By the time I was in my 20s, building my career, navigating my own relationships, the dynamic was deeply ingrained. Mother's calls were rarely just check-ins. They were usually requests. Lena needed help moving. Lena needed a loan to cover rent. Lena's car broke down. Lena needed a sympathetic ear after another failed attempt at a job or a relationship. And always, the implicit message, Monica, you're stable, you're responsible, you can handle this, Lena needs you. I always said yes. It felt less like a choice and more like a reflex. Saying no felt like pulling a thread that might unravel the whole fragile tapestry of family connection. It felt like letting mother down, which was an unbearable thought. It felt like abandoning Lena, who mother painted as perpetually on the brink of collapse. I sent money I could barely spare. I took days off work to drive across the country to help Lena move again. I listened for hours on the phone, offering practical advice that was never taken, simply providing a non-judgmental space for Lena to vent about her latest self-inflicted crisis. Each act of service, each sacrifice of my time, energy, or money, was met with effusive, temporary gratitude from Lena, and weary, knowing sighs of approval from mother. It was the closest I came to feeling truly valued by them. My value was directly proportional to my usefulness, to my willingness to be their safety net. My father had passed away when I was in my late 20s. He was a quiet man, a carpenter, who largely deferred to my mother in family matters, though I always felt a quiet, steady affection from him that didn't come with conditions. His death shifted the dynamic further. Mother became more reliant, more anxious, and her focus on Lena, her most vulnerable child, intensified. I stepped up, helping her manage his estate, sorting through paperwork, making sure she was financially stable. I didn't begrudge her this, she was grieving. But it added another layer to my role as the family's anchor. The family home, a modest house with a small garden on the outskirts of Frankfurt, became a focal point. It was paid for, a tangible asset representing my parents' life's work. Mother intended to stay there, and I helped ensure she could. I took on managing the house maintenance, finding contractors, overseeing repairs, often paying for smaller things myself because it was easier than navigating Lena's convoluted finances or mother's anxiety about spending money, even money she had. Lena visited occasionally, usually needing something, a place to stay for a while, mother's help with bills, emotional support, but she contributed nothing to the house itself, no time, no money, no effort. Years blurred into a pattern of work, managing my own life, and constantly attending to the needs of mother and Lena. I met my partner, Thomas, during this time. He was a kind, stable man, but he was also wary of my family's demands. He saw the imbalance, the way my energy was drained, the way I was treated less like an equal family member and more like a resource. He tried gently to point it out, but I was resistant. I defended my family, explained away their behavior, told myself it was just how we were. I was so deeply embedded in the dynamic, I couldn't see it clearly, or perhaps, I was too afraid to. Mother's health began to decline in her late 70s. Nothing sudden, but a gradual fading, requiring more appointments, more help around the house, more presence. My brother lived in another country by then, his life truly separate. Lena lived closer, but her own life was a constant merry-go-round of jobs she hated or lost, toxic relationships, and dramatic crises. She was emotionally demanding but practically useless. So naturally, the primary caregiving fell to me. I adjusted my work schedule, dedicating evenings and weekends to sitting with mother, taking her to doctors, managing her medications, stocking her fridge. I hired cleaners and a gardener, paying them out of my own pocket, or managing mother's finances to do so, shielding her from the details she found overwhelming. Lena would visit sometimes, sitting with mother for an hour, chatting, maybe painting her nails, performing small acts of superficial care that mother praised effusively, while the hours I spent coordinating medical care or cleaning out the gutters went unremarked. Lena has such a gift for cheering me up, mother would say, smiling faintly. Yes, she does, I'd agree, swallowing the knot in my throat. My role wasn't to cheer her up, it was to manage the practical, often unpleasant realities of her life, the things that didn't feel good or earn praise. My role was simply to do. The house needed significant repairs. The roof leaked, the heating system was ancient, the windows were drafty. I got quotes, hundreds of thousands of euros worth of work. Mother didn't have that kind of liquid cash, and I certainly didn't. I discussed options with Mother, taking out a small loan, using some of the savings Father had left, perhaps selling a small plot of land adjacent to the house that Father had owned separately. Mother worried. Lena offered no solutions, only anxiety about the disruption of any work. I proposed a plan. Use a portion of Father's savings, take out a modest loan secured against the house, and I would oversee the work, manage the contractors, and help Mother navigate the disruption. Mother fretted, but eventually agreed, leaning on my assurances that I would handle everything. I spent 6 months juggling my demanding job with project managing major renovations. I was at the house every evening, every weekend, coordinating roofers, plumbers, electricians. I dealt with unexpected issues, soaring costs, delayed timelines. I used my negotiation skills, honed in the corporate world, to keep the project on track and within a revised, higher budget. I pored over invoices, chased down warranties, made countless decisions, large and small, always with Mother's comfort and the house's long-term stability in mind. Lena visited once during this period. She stayed for a single night, complained about the dust and noise, and left the next morning, offering zero help or even a word of thanks for the effort I was putting in. Mother apologized for Lena's sensitivity. I just nodded. It was easier than expressing the cold, hard resentment that was starting to crystallize in my chest. The renovations finished. The house was solid, warm, and safe. It felt like a physical manifestation of my years of effort and care for my family. Mother was comfortable and relieved. I felt a sense of exhausted satisfaction, a quiet pride in having accomplished such a massive, difficult task almost entirely on my own. I hadn't just fixed a house. I felt like I had shored up my family's future, secured my mother's comfort for the rest of her life. It was a few months after the renovations were complete, just after Mother's 80th birthday, that the true betrayal began to unfold, not with a bang, but with a quiet, chilling conversation. Mother had been more tired than usual, and her doctor suggested updating her will and getting her affairs in order, just as a sensible precaution. Mother, anxious, asked me to help her find a lawyer and go with her. The lawyer was a kind, older woman. We sat in her office, Mother looking frail and nervous. As the lawyer went through the details of Mother's existing will, dated years ago, I listened attentively, ready to help Mother understand or make changes if she wished. The will was simple, everything to be divided equally between her 3 children. This felt fair, expected. Then the lawyer cleared her throat. "Mrs. Stein," she said gently, "there is also the matter of the codicil you added 2 years ago." I blinked. A codicil? Mother hadn't mentioned adding anything to the will. The lawyer explained. 2 years ago, Mother had added an amendment. This amendment stated that upon her death, the house was to be transferred solely to Lena. The rest of the estate, a modest amount in savings, Father's small pension remainder, was to be divided between me and my brother. I sat frozen, solely to Lena. The house I had spent the last 6 months pouring my time, energy, and considerable financial resources into renovating and securing. The house I had been helping maintain for years before that. Solely to Lena, who had lifted not a single finger, contributed not a single euro, and whose only engagement with the property was complaining about it. My brother, who had been absent but at least hadn't been a burden, would get half of the remaining, smaller pot of money. I, who had been the primary caregiver, the financial backstop, the house manager, the renovation project lead, would get the other half of that smaller pot. Lena, who had been nothing but a drain, would get the most significant asset, the asset I had just personally saved and substantially improved. I looked at my mother. Her face was averted, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. She looked small, guilty, and utterly unreadable. "Mother?" My voice was barely a whisper. "The house?" To Lena? But why? Mother finally looked up, her eyes pleading. Oh, Monica, darling. Lena needs it more. She's never been as successful as you or your brother. She doesn't have a stable job, a partner, a secure future like you do. She needs a roof over her head, a place of her own. You're so capable. You'll be fine. The words landed like blows. She needs it more. You're so capable. These weren't expressions of love or appreciation for my capability. They were justifications for dismissing my contributions, for nullifying my years of sacrifice, for giving the fruits of my labor to someone else. My capability, the very trait they relied on so heavily, was being used against me. It was the reason I didn't deserve the same security or fairness. But Mother, I tried again, keeping my voice steady despite the trembling starting deep inside me. I've put so much into that house. My time, my effort, my money for the renovations. It feels like my contribution counts for nothing. Oh, don't be dramatic, Monica, Mother said, a flash of her old impatience surfacing. That was for me. You did that for your mother. That's different. Different? My chest tightened. It wasn't different. It was years of my life, years of my resources, all invested in a family asset, with the implicit understanding that we were a family, that we looked out for each other, that there was fairness. But fairness, I was realizing with sickening clarity, only applied when it benefited Lena. My role was to facilitate fairness for everyone else, while accepting inequity for myself. The lawyer shifted uncomfortably. Mrs. Stein, perhaps you'd like to discuss your reasoning further with your daughter. Mother waved a dismissive hand. No, it's all settled. It's what's best for Lena. Monica will understand. She always does. She always does. The quiet assumption that I would absorb this, that I would accept this blatant injustice with my usual grace and understanding, because that was my function. To understand, to forgive, to carry the burden. We left the lawyer's office. The air outside felt thin, difficult to breathe. I walked beside my mother in stunned silence. The weight of the revelation was immense, crushing. It wasn't just about the house, or the money. It was about what it represented. A lifetime of being seen as less deserving, less important. A convenient tool to be used and discarded when my usefulness for the desired outcome, Lena's comfort, had served its purpose. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake, the lawyer's words echoing in my head. Solely to Lena. Mother's justification. She needs it more. You're so capable. The countless times I had dropped everything, paid for things, fixed problems, just to be told it was for her, for Mother, not for me, not for us. It was like 1,000 small cuts, suddenly bleeding all at once. I thought about the hours spent on the phone listening to Lena's dramas, the times I bailed her out financially, the weekends lost to helping her move or sort through her chaos. I thought about the renovations, the stress, the sheer physical and mental exhaustion of managing that project while working full-time. All of it, done out of a sense of love, duty, and the hope for reciprocal family connection, had apparently been filed away under Monica's voluntary contributions for Mother's immediate benefit, separate from any future consideration of fairness or inheritance. My lifetime of labor, my investment in the family unit, had been quietly erased, deemed irrelevant to the final distribution of assets. The pain was profound, deeper than I had anticipated. It wasn't just financial betrayal, it was emotional. It was a betrayal of the fundamental trust I had placed in my family, in the idea that my efforts were valued, that my place was secure, that I mattered as much as Lena. I called Thomas. I tried to explain through choked sobs. He listened patiently. "Oh, Monica," he said softly. "I'm so sorry. That's incredibly unfair." His simple validation was a lifeline in the churning sea of my distress. "Unfair doesn't even begin to cover it, Thomas," I whispered. "It's like my entire life with them has been a transaction I didn't know I was losing." Like I signed a contract agreeing to be the family's unpaid servant and never get a share of the profits. It sounds like that's exactly what happened, he said gently, and it sounds like it's time to stop signing. His words stayed with me. Stop signing. Stop agreeing to the terms of a contract I never wanted, a contract that devalued me, that used my strengths as justification for my exploitation. The next few weeks were a blur of emotional turmoil. I spoke to my brother. He was sympathetic, but also distant. That sounds rough, Monday, he said. But you know Mom and Lena. Lena's always been Mom's blind spot, and you've always been the strong one, I guess. I guess Mom just went with what felt easiest for her. Easiest for her. Not fairest, not right, just easiest. His perspective, though acknowledging the unfairness, still framed it within the existing family narrative. Lena's need, my strength, Mother's comfort. He wasn't willing to challenge the system. I tried talking to Mother again. I wanted her to understand the depth of my hurt, the feeling of erasure. Mother, please. I pleaded one evening, sitting opposite her in the living room of the renovated house. Can we talk about the will, about the house? I don't understand how you could do this after everything. She became defensive immediately. There's nothing to talk about, Monica. It's done. It's my decision. And I did it for Lena. She has nothing. You have your good job, your savings. Why are you making such a fuss? Are you saying you begrudge your poor sister a place to live? The familiar guilt-tripping, the twisting of my legitimate hurt into selfishness. It's not about begrudging Lena, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. It's about fairness. It's about my years of helping, my money, my time. Is none of that worth anything? Oh, here we go. Mother sighed dramatically, leaning back in her chair. Always keeping score. That's your problem, Monica. You do things, and then you expect payment. Family isn't about keeping score. It's about love, about helping each other out of the goodness of your heart. Goodness of my heart. My help was reframed as purely altruistic, therefore not deserving of any reciprocal consideration. Lena's need was reframed as vulnerability, requiring everyone else's sacrifice. My capability was reframed as independence, meaning I needed nothing. The narrative was airtight, designed to maintain the status quo where I gave, and they took. It's not about keeping score, Mother, I said, my voice trembling now. It's about recognizing contributions. It's about acknowledging that I've given significantly, both financially and emotionally, to this family, to this house. And to be told that my sister, who has contributed nothing, deserves it all because she's less capable, it's a slap in the face. It tells me you don't see my efforts, you don't value what I've done. That's not fair, Mother retorted, her voice rising. I appreciate you, Monica. You're my wonderful daughter. But Lena needs me. She needs stability. And you're trying to take that away from her with your demands. My demands? My demand was for basic recognition and fairness. It wasn't a demand, it was a plea for acknowledgement of my worth within the family unit. I'm not trying to take anything from Lena, I said, feeling a deep weariness wash over me. I'm trying to understand why my own mother values my sister's needs so much more than she values my well-being, my effort, my future security. Why is my contribution to this family always invisible, always less important? Mother closed her eyes, shaking her head. I can't have this conversation, Monica. You're being difficult. You're upsetting me. This is exactly why I worry about Lena. She's so sensitive, she couldn't handle this kind of questioning. And there it was again. The deflection, the pivot back to Lena's fragility, the implication that my valid feelings were difficult and upsetting, and that discussing them might somehow harm Lena. My emotional response was framed as a problem, a disruption to the carefully maintained family equilibrium where I was the steady, compliant one. I stood up. The air felt thick with unspoken accusations and ingrained patterns of behavior. I looked at my mother, this woman I had loved and cared for so deeply, and felt a profound sense of loss. It wasn't just the house I was losing, It was the illusion of the family I thought I had. The family where I was truly seen, truly valued, truly belonged. "All right, Mother," I said quietly, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. "If you can't have this conversation, then maybe we don't have much left to talk about." I walked out of the house that felt less and less like home, leaving my mother sitting in her chair, her face a mask of aggrieved helplessness. I didn't wait for a response. There was nothing left to say. I tried talking to Lena. It was a disaster. I explained my hurt, the unfairness of the will after my years of support, and the renovations. Lena listened for approximately 30 seconds before interrupting. "Oh God, Monica, are you serious?" she whined. "You're making this all about money? After everything I've been through? I finally have a chance at some stability, and you want to fight about it? You're just jealous because Mom finally did something for me instead of you." Jealous? The accusation stung, but it also revealed the deep chasm in our understanding. Lena saw everything through the lens of who was getting more. She didn't see my years of consistent effort, my sacrifices. She only saw that, in this one instance, the pendulum seemed to be swinging her way, and she was determined to protect her perceived gain, regardless of the cost to me, or the blatant injustice of the situation. "It's not about jealousy, Lena," I said, trying to control my rising anger. "It's about how you and Mother have treated me. It's about years of me being the one who always steps up, always helps out, always puts my own needs aside. And then, when it comes to something significant like the house, my years of contribution are completely ignored, and you get everything simply because Mother decided you need it more." "Well, I do need it more," she shot back, her voice petulant. "Look at my life, Monica. It's a mess. I'm struggling. You have your fancy job, your nice apartment, Thomas. You're fine. I deserve this. It's about time something good happened to me." Her entitlement was breathtaking. My stability, hard-won through years of discipline and hard work, was not something to be respected or acknowledged as a result of my efforts. It was simply proof that I didn't need anything, making me a convenient target for further extraction. Her struggles, often the direct result of her choices, were framed as evidence of her inherent helplessness, and therefore her greater claim on the family resources. "Your struggles are not an excuse to exploit my goodwill and hard work, Lena," I said, my voice low and shaking. "You have made choices. I have made choices. But only one of us has consistently relied on the other while giving nothing back, and then expected to be rewarded for it." "Exploit?" Lena shrieked. "How dare you? I'm your sister. Family helps family. You act like it was such a burden to help out Mom and me. If you didn't want to, you should have just said so." Ah, the classic line. You should have just said no. As if saying no within that family system was ever a simple, consequence-free option. Saying no meant triggering guilt trips, accusations of selfishness, withdrawal of affection, and the shattering of the fragile peace I constantly worked to maintain. It wasn't that I couldn't say no, it was that the cost of saying no was astronomical, a cost I had been unwilling to pay until now. It was a burden, Lena. I admitted, the words surprising even myself with their raw honesty. It was a huge burden, for years. And yes, I probably should have set boundaries earlier, but I didn't. Because I loved you, and I loved Mother, and I believed that deep down, we were a family that cared about each other, that my efforts were seen, even if they weren't always acknowledged. The will proved I was wrong. Lena scoffed. "So, what? You're just going to abandon us now because you're not getting the house? How incredibly selfish." Selfish. The word they always used when I dared to express a need or a boundary. It was the ultimate weapon, deployed to silence dissent and maintain control. "No, Lena," I said, feeling a strange sense of calm settle over me amidst the storm of emotion. The pain was still there, but underneath it, a new layer was forming, something hard and resolute. "I'm not abandoning you. I'm finally choosing to stop abandoning myself." I'm choosing to stop allowing myself to be treated like an endless resource with no needs or value of my own. The way you and Mother have handled the house after everything has shown me exactly where I stand, and I can no longer pretend otherwise. I ended the call. My hands were shaking, but my mind was clear. The conversations had confirmed everything. There was no misunderstanding, no accidental slight. This was a conscious decision, rooted in a lifetime of ingrained family dynamics that centered Lena's needs and dismissed mine. They saw my pain not as a valid response to injustice, but as a selfish obstacle to their preferred outcome. The spiral continued for a while. I felt grief, deep and consuming, not just for the betrayal itself, but for the loss of the family I had always longed for, the family I had tried so hard to build and hold together. I felt foolish for having given so much, for so long, without seeing the reality of the situation. I felt angry at Mother, at Lena, and yes, at myself for allowing it to happen. I withdrew from Mother and Lena. I stopped answering their calls and texts as frequently. When I did respond, my messages were brief, polite, and emotionally detached. They noticed. Mother sent hurt emails about my distance. Lena left passive-aggressive voicemails about how worried she was about me and how I was missing out on family events. I talked to Thomas. He was my rock. He didn't try to fix it. He just listened, validated my feelings, and reminded me that my worth wasn't tied to my family's approval or their unfair distribution of assets. I also started seeing a therapist. This was crucial. In therapy, I began to unpack the decades of programming, the deep-seated belief that my value was dependent on my usefulness to others, particularly my family. I learned about people-pleasing, about fawn response, about toxic family systems, and how I had unconsciously played my part in maintaining the dynamic. My therapist helped me see that my desire to be loved and accepted was normal, but the methods I had used, constant sacrifice, silencing my own needs, were ultimately self-destructive and had enabled the very behavior that was now causing me so much pain. She helped me understand that my family's reaction to my boundaries wasn't a reflection of my worthiness, but a reflection of their discomfort with losing their convenient resource. Their pushback wasn't proof that I was doing something wrong, it was proof that I was finally doing something right, prioritizing myself. The clarity didn't come overnight, but it built gradually, like the tide coming in. I started to see the patterns not just in the will, but throughout my entire life with them. The times Mother had praised Lena's minimal efforts extravagantly while ignoring my significant contributions. The times Lena had conveniently disappeared when there was work to be done, only to reappear when she needed something. The way my achievements were often met with a quick, "That's nice," before the conversation pivoted back to Lena's latest drama. I realized that the Monica is capable narrative wasn't a compliment, it was a cage. It trapped me in a role of perpetual strength and self-sufficiency, absolving others of their responsibilities and justifying their reliance on me without reciprocity. The turning point, the moment the clarity became sharp and undeniable, was during a quiet Sunday afternoon reflection. I was sitting alone, thinking about the upcoming holidays and the dread I felt at the thought of navigating my family's expectations and potential passive aggression. I pictured myself walking into Mother's house, feeling small and braced for criticism or thinly veiled jabs. And then, I pictured a different scenario: not going. The thought was terrifying and exhilarating simultaneously. For the first time, I allowed myself to truly consider what it would mean to step outside the system, to remove myself from the equation. It would mean grieving the loss of the family I wanted, the family I had worked so hard to maintain. It would mean accepting that they might not change, that they might not apologize, that they might even paint me as the villain. But it would also mean freedom. Freedom from the constant demands, the emotional manipulation, the sting of invisibility. Freedom to direct my energy towards people who valued me, towards building a life that nourished me instead of draining me. The decision solidified within me. I needed space. Significant space. Not just for a few weeks, but for as long as it took to heal, to rebuild, to establish new patterns of interaction that were based on mutual respect, not ingrained obligation and exploitation. And if mutual respect wasn't possible, then perhaps no interaction was necessary. This realization was the beginning of my empowerment. It wasn't about fighting for the house anymore, it was about fighting for myself. It was about reclaiming my worth, my energy, my peace. It was about saying, silently at first, then louder and louder in my own heart, I matter. The next step was setting boundaries, real ones, not the flimsy, easily permeable ones I had attempted before. This required a level of assertiveness I wasn't comfortable with, a willingness to tolerate their discomfort and disapproval. I started small. When Mother called with a request that felt like an obligation, I didn't make excuses or offer alternative solutions. I simply said, I can't do that, Mother. The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. When Lena texted asking for money, I didn't invent a financial crisis of my own. I just replied, no, I'm not able to help with that right now. Their reactions were predictable. Mother escalated from hurt emails to anxious phone calls, implying I was abandoning her in her old age. Lena became angry and accusatory, rehashing past favors and accusing me of being cruel and unfeeling. I held firm. It was incredibly difficult. My old programming screamed at me. Fix it. Make them happy. You're being selfish. But the quiet voice of my newfound clarity, bolstered by therapy and Thomas's support, reminded me that their discomfort was not my responsibility to fix. My responsibility was to protect my own well-being. The confrontation I needed wasn't a single dramatic scene, but a series of interactions where I held my ground and spoke my truth, calmly and clearly, even when my voice shook. One such conversation happened when Mother called, tearful, saying she needed help with something minor at the house, something Lena easily could have done. Monica, darling, the tap in the kitchen is dripping. It's driving me mad, and I don't know who to call. Lena's busy. My stomach clenched. The old reflex was to jump, to offer to call a plumber, to go over myself. But I paused. Mother, I said, my voice gentle but firm. Lena lives much closer than I do. Can she not help you find a plumber? But she's not good with things like this, Mother said, her voice laced with helplessness. You're so much better at organizing things. Mother, Lena is an adult, I said. She is capable of finding a plumber. Perhaps it's time she started taking on some of these responsibilities for the house that she will inherit. I hated bringing up the will explicitly. But sometimes, it felt necessary to connect their actions with the consequences of those actions. Silence. Then, a sharp intake of breath. That's a cruel thing to say, Monica. Is it? I asked, genuinely wanting her to see. Or is it just stating the reality? I spent years doing these things, and you've made it clear that my contributions don't count in the long run. If Lena is to benefit from the house, she needs to learn to contribute to its upkeep now. The conversation devolved quickly after that. Mother accused me of being bitter and mercenary. I calmly stated that I was simply no longer willing to provide unpaid labor and financial support for an asset that was being deliberately withheld from me. I reiterated that I loved her, but that our relationship needed to change, that I couldn't continue to be her and Lena's default problem solver and financial safety net. The outcome was predictable. The tap eventually got fixed, presumably by Lena, grudgingly, or someone she found. But the dynamic shifted. Mother's calls became less frequent, less demanding. Lena's attempts to guilt-trip or manipulate me were met with polite, firm boundaries. I refused to engage in discussions about their problems unless they were seeking genuine solutions and willing to take responsibility for their part. The fallout was significant. I was, for a time, the pariah. Mother complained about me to other relatives, painting me as cold and ungrateful. Lena spread stories about my alleged greed and selfishness. Family events I chose not to attend were highlighted as proof of my abandonment. It hurt. It hurt deeply to be misunderstood, to be vilified by the people whose approval I had craved for so long. There were moments of doubt, moments when I wondered if I had made a terrible mistake, if the pain of the betrayal was worse than the pain of being ostracized. But then I would remember the feeling in the lawyer's office, the cold calculation in Mother's voice, the casual dismissal of my entire history of support. I would remember the crushing weight of years of people-pleasing and the utter emptiness it had left me with. And I would remember the quiet strength I felt now, the sense of finally standing on solid ground, ground that I had built for myself. I continued therapy. I focused on my work, channeling my energy into projects that felt fulfilling and where my contributions were explicitly valued. I nurtured my relationship with Thomas, who celebrated my increasing confidence and peace. I reconnected with friends I had neglected during my years of family entanglement. I started hobbies, things that were just for me, things that brought me joy without serving any external purpose. Slowly, painstakingly, I rebuilt my life on new foundations, foundations of self-respect, self-worth, and clear, firm boundaries. I realized that the love and acceptance I had desperately sought from my family didn't need to come from them. I could cultivate it within myself, and I could find it in relationships with others who were capable of healthy, reciprocal connection. There was a period of mourning, a grieving process for the idealized family I had carried in my heart for so long. I had to accept that Mother might never truly understand my perspective or apologize. I had to accept that Lena might forever resent me for disrupting the dynamic that benefited her. I had to accept that the family unit I had sacrificed so much for was, perhaps, just a construct I had built in my mind, one that didn't exist in reality. The peace came gradually. It wasn't a sudden arrival, but a slow unfolding. It was in the absence of the familiar anxiety about family calls. It was in the quiet satisfaction of making decisions based on my own needs and desires, not theirs. It was in the realization that their disapproval, while painful, no longer had the power to dismantle me. The will was never changed. The house, I assume, will eventually go to Lena. I have made peace with that. It is a material asset, and while the circumstances surrounding its transfer are deeply unjust, it is not worth the cost of my peace, my mental health, or my sense of self. My true inheritance is not in property. It is in the strength and clarity I found by walking away from a system that was designed to diminish me. I learned that setting boundaries isn't selfish, it's an act of self-preservation. I learned that my worth is inherent, not conditional on my usefulness to others. I learned that walking away from toxic relationships, even family relationships, is sometimes the bravest and most necessary thing you can do for yourself. My relationship with Mother is minimal now. We have short, polite phone calls sometimes. We avoid any topic of substance. It's a shallow connection, a pale imitation of what I once craved, but it's also free of the old pain and manipulation. My relationship with Lena is non-existent. After my last boundary, she withdrew completely, and I made no effort to bridge the gap. There was nothing left to bridge. Life isn't perfect, of course. There are still moments of sadness, lingering echoes of the past hurt, but they are fleeting. They don't consume me anymore. The space that was once filled with anxiety and obligation is now filled with quiet confidence and the freedom to live my life on my own terms. I am no longer the dependable, invisible fixer. I am simply Monica, a woman who finally knows her worth and refuses to let anyone define it for her. The cost of my silence and people-pleasing was immense, but the reward of reclaiming myself has been immeasurable. I stood frozen in the lawyer's office that day, but in the years since, I have learned to walk, then to run, freely. So, that's my story. It's a difficult one to share, full of pain and moments I'm not proud of, moments where I allowed myself to be treated poorly because I didn't know how to stop it. But sharing it feels important because I know I'm not alone. So many of us, especially women, are raised to prioritize the needs of others, to be the peacemakers, the caretakers, the silent workhorses of the family. We're taught that selflessness is the highest virtue, and sometimes, that teaching is twisted by others to justify their own entitlement and exploitation. It's a hard lesson to learn that the people who are supposed to love you unconditionally might be the very ones who benefit most from your lack of boundaries. If anything in my story resonated with you, if you've ever felt invisible, taken advantage of, or betrayed by someone close, please know that you're not broken. You're not difficult for having needs or feelings. Your desire for fairness and respect is not selfish, it's human. Finding your voice, setting boundaries, and reclaiming your life is a long and often painful process. You might lose relationships you thought were essential. You might face criticism and misunderstanding. But I promise you, the peace and strength you gain on the other side are worth it. Your worth is not up for negotiation. You are inherently valuable just as you are, regardless of what you can do for others or what they decide to give you. Thank you for listening. If you found this story helpful, or if it sparked something in you, please give this video a like. Subscribe if you'd like to hear more stories about finding your voice and healing. And share your thoughts in the comments below. Your experiences are valuable too. Remember, you deserve to live a life where you are seen, valued, and respected. You have the strength within you to make that happen. You are not alone.